Chapter 5 Maiden Voyage. Carrie turned away and continued toward the dock, walking very slowly. I walked beside him without speaking for a while. It was hard to think of the right things to say, with which to begin. You snuck up there, didn't you, Carrie? You knew Robert was coming over, so you snuck back into the house and up into your attic workshop to spy on us, I said softly and as calmly as I could. You're crazy, he said. I had something to finish and just went up there. It's not my fault you didn't know I was up there anyway, he said, stopping and spinning around on me. Why are you so worried? You do something you're ashamed of? Did I, Carrie? He stared at me a moment, his eyes blazing. Well, did I? How would I know, he said, marching over to the sand faster now. I ran to catch up with him. How would you know? You would look through that peephole, Carrie. That's how you would know. What? He stopped again, his hands on his hip. Peephole? You know what I'm talking about, Carrie Logan. If you want, we'll go right back to the house and to my room and I'll point it out to you. He tried to stare me down again, but this time his eyes shifted guiltily away and his face turned a bright shade of pink. Oh, he said, nodding. I know what you're talking about. There was a knothole in the wood that just fell through a while ago. A knothole. Yeah, he said. I just noticed it myself the other day. You think I have nothing better to do than go up there and peek down at you and your boyfriend? I hope you have better things to do, I said. And if you tell me you didn't do it and you don't do it, I'll believe you, I said. I just forgot to fix it, that's all, he said. I was gonna plug it up with some wood glue the other day, he added, looking grateful for being allowed to come up with an explanation. I just got too involved with what I was doing and forgot. Okay, I said. I can't believe you would accuse me of such a thing, he continued, now on the offensive. Why shouldn't I think it, Carrie? You treat me as if I'm some sort of fallen woman now, just because I'm seeing Robert, who, I might add, you have no good reason not to like. He's done nothing to you. He and his family are part of a resort business, bringing those tourists up here, Carrie said bitterly. You know that we need tourists and that it's not you talking anyway. It's Grandma Olivia. Who would buy Daddy's lobsters if there were no tourists? And who would want to buy our cranberries if people didn't want the products from the Cape? Why do they buy them? It's because we're a famous resort in the region of America, and it's time everybody accepted that. The only people who don't are those who inherited so much money they don't care about anybody else. You ought to go work for a chamber of commerce or a tourist bureau, he quipped. Maybe I will. You would not. He thought for a moment. Would you? I don't intend to, but I wouldn't turn it down out of hand, I said. It's all besides the point, Carrie. You have to judge people for who they are and not what their parents do or what their grandparents did. Don't be such a cod snob, I warned. He couldn't help but smile because that was a term he and I had invented when we were much younger. He looked away. I just don't want anyone to take advantage of you, Laura. You're very trusting and innocent. Oh, and you're a man of the world, Carrie Logan? Since when? I hope what boys are looking for these days, and I know it, he said sharply. Robert's not like that. How do you know? I think I would know better than you would, Carrie, unless you were eavesdropping on every one of our conversations and spying on every one of our dates, I said. Are you? No, he said. So, then tell me why you won't at least give Robert a chance. You'll be surprised how much you two have in common, Carrie. You both work for your parents. You may not respect what his parents do as much as you respect what Daddy does, but Robert's devoted to his father's business just as you're devoted to Daddy's. Nothing's been handed to him on a silver platter, just as nothing's been handed to you. You both work hard for everything you have. You're both stronger and better people than the other boys at our school, I said. I saw from the twinkle in his eyes he liked that very much. Robert wants to be an architect someday. He's very interested in the work that you do with boats too. Few of your other so-called friends even care. None of them ever come over to see your workshop. I don't ask them to, he said. But why don't you? Because you think they're sincere in their interest, that's why. You don't believe it. Well, Robert is, I said. He smirked. You bought this guy, hook and line, and sinker it seems. Carrie, can't you have enough faith in me to trust my judgment this one time? You used to respect the things that I said and believed, I wailed. Tears flooded my eyes. When he looked at my face, his softened. I'm not saying I don't believe you, Laura. He looked at the ocean pensively and then turned back to me. Okay, I'll give him a chance, he said, if that's what you want. I do. Fine. Now I've got to get down to the dock. I promised I'd help Dad, he said. You've got to start studying for exams, Carrie, I called as he started away. He just waved back at me without turning and continued to walk past the pink wild beach grass strands. His hair was lifting in the wind. I stood there watching him for a few moments and then made my way back to the house feeling as if I'd won some sort of victory, but not sure what it was. However, the following Monday at school, things were different. Carrie was friendly to Robert, so friendly, in fact, that it had taken me by surprise. Laura tells me all the work you do and your folks are doing on the sea marina. I'd like to check it out one of these days, Carrie offered, glancing at me quickly. Great, Robert said. I could sure use some advice about the dock. It has to be reinforced, only I'm not sure how to do it. Maybe Wednesday, Carrie said, after school. He turned to me. We'll pick up May and take her along. She'd love that, I said, bursting with so much happiness I thought I might explode. We'll have to tell Ma, Carrie said. Let's not mention it to Dad, he added in a lower voice. I nodded. Despite my father's need to have a market for his lobsters and cranberries, he parroted Grandma Olivia's complaints about the tourist industry and the damage it had done and would continue to do to the Cape. I was grateful Carrie hadn't brought it up in front of Robert, but I was always on pins and needles when talk turned to tourists and the effects that it would have on our town. It was a subject Carrie and Robert would have to agree not to agree about. That afternoon, Carrie joined Robert and me in the cafeteria for lunch. Robert asked him some questions about boats, and Carrie talked right through till the warning bell. Every once in a while, Robert glanced at him, his eyes wide with surprise. I simply sat there, holding my breath, afraid if I uttered a word or moved a muscle, I might break the magic spell. But it didn't break. On the way home from school that day, Carrie offered that he might have been wrong about Robert. Maybe it's because he's not from around here, he said. At least he doesn't follow Adam Jackson in that crowd. He asked me to give him some sailing lessons. Maybe this coming weekend, he thought aloud. I bit down on my lip and nodded. I felt like someone tiptoeing over a floor of fragile glass, afraid that if I stepped down a little too hard, it would crack and shatter and break around me. You come along too if you want, he said. That sounds like fun, Carrie. We'll wait and see how the weather is. As for it being fun, that'll depend on how good a student he is. Robert said he could definitely get away from work at the hotel, I asked. Well, I promised I'd help him stain the inn's back dock on Thursday. I've got some time, Carrie said. You would? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, you do? I mean, it's no big deal, Laura. If he holds his own, we'll finish in an hour, Carrie said, with more of a hint of a challenge in his voice. On Wednesday, as Carrie had promised, we picked up May and went to the sea marina. I introduced May and Robert's mother and taught her some sign language to use while Carrie and Robert went out back with Robert's father to look at the dock. Whatever Carrie recommended pleased and impressed Robert's father, who had only high praise for Carrie afterward. We all enjoyed some cold lemonade on the front porch. while Carrie and Robert's father continued their talk about building and repairs. May loved Robert's mother, who gave her an impressive watch, still working order. She found it in the dresser drawer in one of the rooms when they first took over the property. It had Roman numerals in a pearl-like casing with a thin leather strap. May was so excited about it. She walked all the way home with her wrists raised so she could admire it better. Daddy's going to ask her about that, Carrie warned. We can't tell May to lie. To both of us, May was so precious and special, the very thought of having her do something even slightly sinful was upsetting. No one was purer in spirit. Let her tell the truth, Carrie. We haven't done anything wrong. It's just being good Christian to help other people. If Daddy says anything, we'll remind him of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profited me nothing. Carrie laughed. Serves him right for having us read the Bible every night before dinner, he said. Dad did ask about the watch, but he didn't understand May's answer and asked me. I told him the truth. He was quiet for a moment. I don't like her taking things from strangers, Laura, he said. Mrs. Royce isn't a stranger anymore, Daddy, at least not to me, I added. He didn't look happy, but he let it go and let May keep the watch. On Thursday, Carrie went home with Robert and helped him stain the rear deck. I didn't go along, but I was so nervous about the two of them together without me around that I couldn't do anything but stare out the window and wait for Carrie to come home. True to his word, he wasn't gone much more than an hour. I hurried downstairs to greet him at the door. You finished it already? I asked as I stepped out onto the porch. What's the big deal? He said with a shrug. Painting a hole? Now that's a big deal. Did Robert think it was as easy as you did? I asked. I was really asking if they had gotten along. He held his own, Carrie replied. I guess I'll spend a few more hours teaching him something about sailing on Saturday, he added, if you want to come along. Oh, Carrie, I cried and embraced him. Thank you. I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. He stood there, frozen for a moment. It was almost as if my kiss burned him. We hadn't kissed each other for some time, both of us self-conscious about it, but I was like spring water gushing. I couldn't help it. It's no big deal, Carrie said almost angrily. I'd do it for anyone, he said. I have to go wash up. He hurried past me and upstairs. I knew I should be happy. I should feel good about it all. But there was a cold chill in the air. It was as if Carrie had left his shadow behind, and that shadow lingered over me, blocking out the sea and the sun. The next day at school, Robert announced that his parents insisted taking off all Saturday. They said I haven't had a whole day off since we arrived, and since we're ahead of schedule. That's wonderful. Why don't we have a picnic on the beach, Carrie? I suggested. All right, here's the plan. We'll do some sailing lessons late in the morning and then stop to picnic on the beach around Logan Cove. Logan Cove? Where's that? Robert asked. Carrie and I exchanged smiles. It's our secret place, I said. Carrie and I named it Logan Cove because practically no one else goes there. It's about a half a mile north of the bog, Carrie said. We don't have to worry about tourists bothering us. Oh, Robert said with a twinkle in his eyes, sounds secluded. I can't wait. After our Bible reading at dinner that night, Daddy paused before cutting the bread and glanced at me. I hear you hope to make your landlubber seaworthy, he said. I looked at Carrie for a hint as to what Daddy really said. But Carrie's face was a closer look and closed, unreadable. We're going to give him a lesson with the sunfish, I said. We? Carrie asked with a smile. I'm a good sailor too, Carrie Logan. You've said it yourself. Yeah, I have, but you don't do it enough to be a good teacher, he explained. Daddy liked that and laughed. Then he grew serious. If you take May along, I don't want her in the sunfish while you're teaching him, Carrie. Of course not, Dad, Carrie said. Even though the sunfish was only big enough to seat two, May was so small that we usually took her with us when Carrie and I went sailing. I had already promised her she would be part of our picnic. May and I'll sit on the shore and watch them, Daddy, don't worry. He grunted, which was as close as an approval as I would get. The weather looks promising, Carrie said. Daddy agreed, and that was all they said about it. I was too excited to keep it all bottled up. May sat in my room as I planned the picnic. My hands moved with my thoughts as I paraded back and forth listening to things we would bring and the food I needed to prepare. Maybe I should make shrimp salad. Carrie loves shrimp salad. We could barbecue though, couldn't we? Should we do hamburgers on the grill or some lobster? We'll need salads. Oh, I should make my lemon cake. Don't you think? Robert's going to be so surprised when he learns what a good cook I am. What? I asked May when she started to sign. Oh, games? Yes, we'll bring something for you and I to do while they're on the sunfish. No, I'd be too embarrassed to let him see my drawings, May. We'll bring Chinese checkers, okay? And Carrie's frisbee. I'm worried about what I should make. I'll talk to Mommy about it tomorrow. No, let's talk to her now, I said, and reached down for May's little hand. She flew up her feet and followed behind me as I went downstairs to talk to Mommy. On Saturday morning, as Mommy and I packed for the picnic, Carrie grumbled at us from the breakfast table. I don't know why you're just not having sandwiches and cranberry juice like we usually do, he said. This isn't exactly the blessing of the fleet, he added with a laugh. He was referring to an annual event on the Cape when the boats were decorated with pennants and the priest led the procession from the church. Everyone's dressed up and there's an elaborate food and drink. Just like a man, Mommy said, complaining and mocking until he sinks his teeth in what he quiets down like a church mouse at sermon. I laughed and Carrie turned crimson. A little over an hour later, Robert arrived. He was dressed in a pair of new sneakers, khaki pants, and a crisp white shirt. His preppy sailor outfit was topped off by a jaunty sailor cap. Carrie, who wore a pair of torn shorts, was barefoot and shirtless, laughed. What do you think we're sailing, a yacht? He joked. No, but I thought I'd get into the swing of things, Robert said, undaunted by Carrie's ridicule. And you look very nice, Robert, I said. I was wearing a pink sundress over my bathing suit and thought that Robert and I looked like the perfect couple. Sailing's work, Carrie followed sternly. You're going to mess up that pretty boy outfit. That's all right, Robert said. It's not like I have many chances to wear these clothes. Hey, what's all that? He asked, nodding at the big picnic basket. She made a feast, Carrie said. Gee, Laura, you didn't have to go all out like that, but thanks, Robert said. Let's get started. We're missing some good wind, Carrie said gruffly, obviously eager to change the subject. May carried our towels and Robert offered to carry the blanket. The weather was with us. A gentle breeze barely nudged the foamy white clouds along the azure sky. South of us, the sea was already peppered with sailboats. Looks like a perfect day for sailing, Robert commented as we trekked over the sand toward our dock. Oh, and you would know the perfect day for sailing? Carrie shot back over his shoulder. Me? I know as much about sailing as I do about nuclear physics, Robert replied. I don't even understand how you get a boat to move. The wind gets the boat to move, Carrie said. I could tell by his mood. He was already softening, and I smiled at myself. Carrie was in his glory, talking about the things he loved the most, sailing and boats. You set sail at 90-degree angle and the longitudinal axis of the boat, keeping the power of the wind on the sail's back surface. That's called running before the wind. In sailing off the wind, the sails are set at 45-degree angle from the axis of the craft. This way, the wind exerts the pulling rather than the pushing action. Understand? I will when I see it, I guess, Robert said, smiling at me. Carrie glanced back. This won't work if you don't pay attention and concentrate, he said stiffly. I will, Robert promised. Sorry. The wind flows at a rate of a speed along the forward surface of the sail, creating an area of lower pressure ahead of the sail. Understand? Yes. Aye. Carrie shook his head. I must be crazy. He's paying attention, Carrie, I insisted. We'll see. I just don't understand why the wind doesn't turn the boat over if the sail is at a 45-degree angle, Robert said. Carrie stopped walking and turned. It would if the hull were perfectly flat. Every sailboat has a fixed keel that acts as a flat longitudinal plane to prevent the boat from moving sideways, Carrie explained, illustrating it with his hands. Oh, but if we're moving it with a 45-degree angle, how do you get the boat to go in the direction you want it to go? Robert asked. Carrie's eyes filled with a glint of pleasure he always had when talking about boats. I was glad Robert was asking questions. By sailing on the wind, a sailboat makes a course about 45 degrees away from the wind's direction. First, you go to the left, then you go to the right, zigzagging. It's called tacking. You should know the terms so you'll know what I mean when I show you and tell you to do something. Coming about means shifting from one tack to another. We'll do it with the rubber, pointing the bow up into the wind and then away from the wind on the opposite tack, or steering away from the direction of the wind until the sails fill from the other side. Robert nodded, but I could see he wasn't clear on what Carrie was explaining. In fore and aft rigged vessels. Fore and aft? You don't even know what that means. I think I do. It's for the front. Great. Robert smiled. In fore and aft rigged vessels, this maneuver is called jibbing. The square rigged is called wearing. If you start to lose control, I'll say we're broaching. Understand? Lose control. It can happen, Carrie said dryly. What happens? We turn over and you fall into the sea and mess up your fancy outfit, Carrie said, turned and walked on. Robert looked at me. Don't worry, he won't let our boat turn over, I said. He hasn't ever? That's reassuring, Robert remarked, and we followed with May at our side. May and I set the blanket on a nice flat spot in Logan's Cove, while Robert and Carrie launched the sunfish. I had brought along Daddy's binoculars so we could watch them from shore. I knew that once Carrie had boarded the boat and set sail, he would be all business. He was really a very good instructor and an expert at reading the wind. They went back and forth, the sunfish bouncing over the waves and looking as if it was running smoothly each time. When I gazed through the glasses, I saw Carrie lecturing, pointing and adjusting, directing Robert to make this turn and that, explaining as they went along. Even so, a few times they did come close to capsizing when Robert was at the rubber and controlling the sail. May and I played a few games of Chinese checkers and searched the beach for interesting seashells and waded out along the jetty of slippery rocks, searching for tiny crabs. The terns flew around us and followed us everywhere, especially when we returned to the blanket. They knew about picnics, anticipated crumbs, and eyed us cautiously. Nearly 2.5 hours later, Carrie brought the sunfish around and headed for Logan's Cove. They beached where we had set up our blanket. Robert's clothes were soaked, but he looked exhilarated. How'd it go? I asked when they made their way up to us. Fair to middling, Carrie said without much enthusiasm. It takes lots of practice, I said. I looked closer at Robert's face. His cheeks and forehead were beginning to look sunburnt, but the back of his neck was the reddest, deep crimson. "Oh, Robert, you should have worn some sunblock. You're going to be hurting tomorrow." "Yeah, I'm going to regret not putting any on. I feel crisp as burnt toast," he said. He gazed at Carrie. "How come you're not burnt?" "I've been out there so long, my skin is used to the sun," he said. "Anyway, I'm starving. Let's eat," he said. May and I took out the food, and as we ate, Robert described his sailing lesson, revealing that Carrie had been screaming, "You're broaching!" "More than half of the time. I think I finally got the hang of it toward the end, huh, Carrie?" "You're getting there," Carrie said. Actually, he reluctantly offered. "For a landlubber, you didn't do too badly." "Thanks," Robert said. He was practically beaming. "You're not so bad yourself for an old sea dog." "Old sea dog, huh?" "You are a bit bow-legged," Robert kidded, and I laughed. "I'm not," Carrie stood up. "Am I, Laura?" "Only just a little, Carrie," I said hesitantly. "Is that so? Well, I've got perfect balance on or off land," Carrie bragged. Robert laughed. "Want to find out, big shot?" Carrie challenged. Robert glanced at me. "Carrie, no," I said. "He's the one who claims to be perfect," Carrie said. "What's your challenge?" Robert asked. Ever hear of Indian wrestling?" "Sure. I'm the Eastern United States champion," Robert bragged. "Will you two stop? We'll have dessert to eat. Sit, Carrie," I ordered and pointed to his spot on the blanket. "We have to earn it first," Carrie taunted. "Champ." Carrie took his stance with his hands out. The object was to pull the opponent so far off balance that he fell. I knew Carrie was very good at it, probably from doing balancing acts on the boats during heavy seas. Robert jumped to his feet. May laughed and clapped her hands in anticipation. "You're going to mess up that sailing costume even more," Carrie warned. "We'll see." "Will you two stop?" I pleaded. My heart began to pound. Whenever egos came into question, especially masculine egos, there was always trouble. Robert grabbed Carrie's hand, took his stance, and the struggle began. Both were strong, their forearms bulged and their shoulders strained. Robert surprised me with his balance, and I could tell Carrie was amazed as well. He had thought he would make short work of Robert. Both nearly toppled over each other, and then Robert faked a thrust forward and pulled Carrie so hard Carrie lost his footing and fell face forward, unable to catch himself before he fell face first into the sand. When he pushed himself up, his cheeks were blistered with sand, as was his chest and legs. "And still the champion of East Coast, Robert Royce," Robert cried, holding his hands up. May laughed. Carrie's eyes met mine, and I knew this was not going to end well. "Let's have a rematch," he demanded. "You'll have to speak to my manager," Robert said, nodding at me. "Carrie, please stop. Let's have dessert." "I don't need dessert. Come on. You were just lucky, Royce," Carrie declared. He took his stance and held out his hand. Robert looked at me and I shook my head, but he shrugged. "I can't pass up the challenge," he said. "I have fans to consider." "Great." I slammed the basket cover over and sulked as they started their struggle. It went as before, both nearly toppling over each other. Carrie was much more intense this time, his determination twisting his mouth and filling his eyes with fire. Once again, Robert made a good feint. Only this time, when he pulled back, Carrie fell forward onto him and the two of them toppled on the sand. "Tie," I cried, happy it was over, but they didn't let go of each other. The test of strength continued on the ground. Robert laughed and Carrie tugged his arm, pushing him back to the sand. In response, Robert clutched Carrie's ankle and pulled him to the sand. The two of them grabbed, turning and twisting one over the other. "Stop it," I screamed. I stood up. May did too. "If you two don't stop it, I'm leaving." They grunted, neither relinquishing his hold on each other. The struggle continued. I grabbed May's hand and she looked back over her shoulder as I pulled her away. I marched over the beach and back to our house. leaving the two muscle men grunting and groaning in the sand. Thanks to their stupid male egos, what could have been a perfectly wonderful afternoon was ruined. Mommy and Daddy had gone to town, so I didn't have to answer any questions. Instead, I went upstairs to my room, May trailing along, wondering what had gone wrong. Boys, I signed angrily. They can be such idiots. They were getting along so well, and now this. I'm tired of it. You're lucky. You still treat boys as if they had cooties. Not anymore, Laura. I like a boy in my class, she confessed. Don't tell him, I advised. I was feeling so bitter and angry, I seized my latest needlework and sat at the window, jabbing the needle in and out of the cloth. A short time later, I saw Robert and Carrie. They weren't walking side by side until they reached the house. They stopped and spoke to each other quietly. Thanks for ruining the picnic, I hollered out the window. The two looked up. We were just fooling around, Laura, Carrie claimed. Why'd you run off like that? You weren't fooling around, you two idiots, I declared. I don't care if I do anything with either of you again. Laura, Robert pleaded. It was just, I folded my arms and sat back so neither of them could see me. I didn't hear them come into the house and I didn't hear Robert drive off, but I held my curiosity on a tight leash and did look out the window. They're planning something, I thought, and suddenly heard the two of them singing beneath my window. To the tune of My Darling Clementine, they sang, we're so sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry for what we did. We feel lost and gone forever, oh, our darling Laura Logan. They repeated it until I stuck my head out and saw the two of them now with their arms around each other's shoulders gazing up at me. I couldn't help but laugh. Are we forgiven? Robert asked. You shouldn't be, but you are, I said with a smile. Then can we have our dessert now? Carrie followed. We worked up another appetite. Oh, now the feast makes sense, huh? Come on in, I said, delighted that they had come to a truce. I signed to May, explaining what happened now. She shook her head with confusion. Being grown up is going to be harder than I thought, she replied, and I laughed. After dessert, Carrie went back to the dock to dock the sunfish, and I walked Robert to his car to say goodbye. I had a great time. I'm really sorry about us ruining it for you, Laura. I'm just happy you and Carrie are getting along, Robert. I just hope you two will stay that way. We will, he promised. You're a really good cook, he said. I enjoyed the picnic. Thank you. He paused, and I saw that he was thinking of something that was taking a great deal of courage to say, so I helped. What is it, Robert? I was just wondering, my parents are going to Boston next Saturday to buy some things for our place. I'm not going, he explained. How would you like to come over to the hotel and maybe we could have dinner together? We could pretend we're the owners and the hotel is full of guests and... I don't know, I said, looking back at the house and wondering what I would say to Daddy. Robert looked very disappointed. Oh well, it was just an idea, he said, opening the car door. I guess there's nothing wrong with me going to dinner at your house, I said. I'll tell the truth. You invited me. That is the truth, he said, encouraged. It's not lying if you don't mention that your parents are away. No, it's not lying. It'll work out, I promised. Great. What should I make? I'll think about it and I'll let you know during the week, I said. It'll be like we're married, he said and leaned out to kiss me. I love you, Laura, he whispered. I love you too, I said, and he started the engine and backed out, waved and drove over the road, dappled with sunlight and shadows. Perhaps someday we would get married, I daydreamed, and then I thought about Grandma Olivia. She probably wouldn't attend the wedding. She might even excommunicate me from the family as she did her own son, Chester. But like Uncle Chester, that was a chance I was willing to take a price. And I was willing to pay for the one I loved. However, I had no idea just how powerful Grandma Olivia was and how much she could raise the costs.